And in an historic first, they also committed to helping those species recover, so that the life we share our planet with can not only survive, but thrive. Making these goals a reality will take all of us working together. Reverse the Red is supporting governments, conservation experts, and communities around the world as they join forces to activate tried and tested tools and tie global efforts to local expertise. All in a coordinated effort to assess, plan, and act for wildlife. Together, we can save species from extinction. Together, we can secure our planet's future. Together, we can reverse the red.
Welcome, everyone. We are so happy to have you join us for the second session on the Global Strategy for Fungal Conservation. My name is Megan Joyce. I'm the Outreach and Engagement Coordinator for Reverse the Red, and we are playing host to this series of conversations, which we are really excited about. If you didn't join us for our first one, which was 2 weeks ago, we do have the recording of that session on our YouTube channel, and we'll pop that link in the chat momentarily. So this is the second session, and we're really excited to have a bunch of wonderful speakers to introduce the global strategy for fungal conservation. So just a quick thank you to the Reverse the Red Governing Council. We are co-chaired by IUCN Species Survival Commission and the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums, alongside Botanic Gardens Conservation International, Rewild, Toronto Zoo, and ZSL. And we are also always a partnership that is made possible with some of these annual support from these organizations. So really thankful to them for all of their help in enabling us to have these webinars, have these conversations, and bring conversations like the Global Fungal Strategy to you all. So we have lots of links to share with you. I'll share that recording. And without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Katya, who's going to lead us through today's session.
Thank you so much, Megan. And thank you for Reverse the Red to let us have our webinars here. So I'm just gonna share my screen. Hopefully you can all see it. Yeah. So I had a slide to remind everyone that this is a series of 3, Megan already mentioned. So if you missed the first one, please watch the recording. Greg Mueller went through introducing why we should be thinking about fungi and why we need this strategy. And next week, we're going to have the third and last webinar. And hopefully we'll be less as talking and more you guys asking questions and making comments. We try to have that webinar more like an open forum where you can join and we can have a conversation about the strategy and next steps. And for those of you who missed the previous webinar and are just joining us for the first time, we just wanted to remind you what's the problem and why we're developing this strategy. And basically the issue is that fungi are still rarely included in national, regional, and international conservation policy and actions. And an example is this tagline for the United Nations Decade on Biodiversity, where you can see the fish, the birds, the trees, the bees, etc. But there are no fungi, as they were not considered at all during this initiative. Like they are not part of biodiversity, which is just unthinkable. And this has serious implications, not only for the conservation of fungi, but also of all the other species that depend on them. And before we jump into the global strategy for fungal conservation, I just want to give a quick introduction on global policy and exactly what is that. So it's an agreement between countries to collectively address challenges that cannot be solved by a single country alone. And it's not the same as national law, although of course it influences it. It's signed off by governments, but it's shaped by scientists, practitioners, indigenous people, and local communities. And it is implemented at the national and local government and local levels by governments, but not only. And I think this is really the key point, because policy only has impact when it's implemented. There's no point in having the right language or laws if that's not reflected into on-the-ground action. And for that, we need a whole of society approach that involves all sectors, not just governments, but policymakers, researchers, indigenous peoples, local communities, funders, businesses, and so on. And there are many different international treaties and frameworks. I'm listing here just some examples that are particularly relevant for fungal conservation, like the Convention on Wetlands, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, CITES, and the most relevant for us today is the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and specifically, it's Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, the GBF, which is the CBD's action plan for biodiversity. And we chose to align the global strategy for fungal conservation with the GBF because it's by far the most comprehensive one. The global strategy for plant conservation is associated with it, so there is a precedent for something like this. It covers both terrestrial and aquatic systems. Its language already includes fungi because it's meant to focus on all species. And it has the longest time frame of all. Although the targets are for 2030, which we'll go through in a minute, its vision and 4 goals are for 2050. And even if the targets change in some way or form, after 2030, we don't expect them to be significantly different because they have to align with these goals. And this is also the time frame we're looking for the fungal strategy. It is also through the CBD that Fungi Foundation, Chile, and the UK introduced the Fungal Conservation Pledge that calls out for countries to explicitly recognize fungi in their policies and actions. And the global strategy for fungal conservation is the implementation tool that will help countries achieve their commitments. And most importantly, the targets of the GBF are highly relevant for fungal conservation. They cover all the main actions related to biodiversity, from spatial planning, restoration, and protected areas, to halting extinction and ensuring the sustainable use and trade of wild species, controlling and mitigating threats like invasive species, pollution, and climate change, promoting sustainable farming, ecosystem services, and green urban spaces for people, as well as developing implementation tools and solutions that are inclusive, fair, and equitable, with appropriate mechanisms for benefit sharing, capacity building, and collaboration across sectors and regions. In total, there are 23 GBF targets. And of course, fungi are important for achieving all of them, and vice versa. All these targets are important for fungal conservation. But we have identified the 12 targets that definitely cannot be met without fungi. And those are targets 1 to 11 and 20. And I just want to point out that when you look into some of these targets in detail, it might seem they're quite repetitive, but they actually cover different things. So targets 1 to 8 focus on reducing threats to biodiversity, while targets 9 to 11 for the fungal strategy, but also 12 and 13 for the GBF, are all about meeting people's needs. So they're all about people and their connection with biodiversity. And targets 14 to 23 in the GBF, from which we selected target 20 for fungi, are about developing and tools that are needed for implementation and mainstreaming. And we followed exactly the same structure in the GBF and developed actions for each of these targets that we identified will not be met unless fungi are included. But although we didn't develop specific actions for the remaining targets of the GBF, we think it's important to recognize that many of their principles need to be considered for the effective implementation across the whole strategy. So all actions must recognize, respect, and include the rights, knowledge, and traditional practices of Indigenous people and local communities, and women in particular, and their active involvement and their free, prior, and informed consent across all planning and implementation is critical for equitable and effective outcomes across the whole strategy. We need to strengthen the capacity not only of government agencies, but also NGOs, academic institutions, and civil society across different fields related to fungal conservation. We need a whole of society collaborative approach, and I really don't get tired of saying this, that involves not only mycologists, but botanists, zoologists, social scientists, policymakers, local stakeholders, and so on. We really need everyone for effective conservation of fungi and all the other species. And we also need to promote the development and access sharing of information and technology across different regions. The success of this strategy depends on mainstreaming fungi into broader biodiversity, climate, and sustainable development policies and actions at all levels, not just at the CBD level. And we need continued investment and sustainable funding in research to address key knowledge gaps. And again, this research should also incorporate Indigenous and traditional knowledge and the active involvement of Indigenous peoples and local communities. So how did we get around to developing the global strategy for fungal conservation? As Greg mentioned in the first webinar a couple of weeks ago, we first announced the idea at the 12th International Mycological Congress in Maastricht, where we got consensus from the community and where the 12 key targets were selected. We then brought together a diverse advisory committee who agreed on the process and the priorities for the strategy, and they took the leadership of drafting the actions and priorities for the different targets. This group then called out others to help them draft the actions, and we informally created the Global Fungal Conservation Network. In total, we had 73 people contributing to this first draft of the strategy. And I just want to take a moment to remember Dr. Adriana Romero Olivares, who sadly passed away during the preparation of this strategy. I never had the chance to meet her in person, only online, but I know she's deeply admired by those who know her, and she definitely left a lasting mark on our community and also on this strategy that she contributed for. And the strategy really has been an effort from the white mycological community, and we hope more people will join us as we go through this public consultation, especially as we look into the next steps for implementation. Up until yesterday, we had almost 130 people registered as part of the network, from 48 countries and representing 42 organizations. And for those that are listening who haven't joined it yet, we would love to have you. We're not only looking for mycologists, but we're looking for anyone with a diverse range of expertise and knowledge, including from the private sector and local stakeholders that are interested in engaging in conservation and sustainable use of fungi. And the participation in the network is voluntary, and we welcome applications from representatives of specific organizations or as individuals. So you don't have to be affiliated with an organization. And we also welcome multiple members from the same organization. We also have Plant Life International as the secretariat, providing critical institutional backup and coordination for the strategy and the network. And just to be clear, Plant Life will not be making decisions at the top level. This is the role of the network, but will be providing administrative and communication support that is so important. And hopefully you're already aware, we're calling for comments through public consultation until the 22nd of June. So please provide your feedback if you haven't already, to make sure that we have a strong strategy for launching at COP17 in Armenia this October. And I think Megan or someone will be sharing the links for joining the network and for providing feedback. If not, we'll also have the links at the end of the slides. And when you look at the current draft of the strategy, you will see that we started by introducing why fungi even need to be in this conversation and the scale of the problem. This is then followed by a purpose section where we set out what the strategy is trying to achieve and how it relates to different international frameworks, particularly the CBD Global Biodiversity Framework. And then we outline how the actions are structured and highlight the need to consider the other targets of the GBF for which we didn't develop actions, but they are so important. The principles that I just went through a few slides before. And then we have each of the CBD Global Biodiversity Frameworks targets at the top with the text exactly as it is on the GBF. So the title of the target and the text that comes just underneath it is exactly as it is in the GBF. And then we have a short text just highlighting why fungi should even be included and why they are so important for achieving this target, followed by the list of conservation actions that must be implemented to include fungi across national and global policy and action, and the research and infrastructure priorities that will support and facilitate the implementation of those actions. And I just want to emphasize that this doesn't mean we have to wait until we have done all the research before we can start acting. The actions and the priorities, the research priorities, should be implemented in parallel and through close collaboration and engagement from the different stakeholders, including government and the mycological community. And then at the end, we'll also list relevant case studies and existing tools and resources to support and demonstrate what is already being done and how the actions can be implemented. And this is not an exhaustive list, but it's a selection to reflect different approaches, geographies, and sectors, and hopefully to inspire further action. We hope to maintain this as a dynamic list online as well, and to be adding new case studies and resources whenever possible. So if you know of any missing here that you think are important, please make sure to send them to us even after the end of the public consultation, to keep this list up to date. And the important is that the case studies and the resources, they demonstrate and support practical implementation of the actions and priorities to facilitate future implementation as well. And I'll pass it to Rachel, who will now take you through the implementation and next steps.
Yeah, thank you, Katia. And Katia's controlling my slides, so I really hope this works. Hope it'll be seamless. So yeah, we'll have this detailed strategy. It's packed with really useful stuff. But how do we make sure once it's published and it's out there that it doesn't sit in inboxes and folders gathering cyber dust? So for implementation to be successful, it has to be accessible to our different target audiences. Can't deny that it's a long document and it's a detailed document. So we need to adapt it, we need to simplify it, and we need to tailor it to our individual audience. So whether that's the policymakers, the governments, the academia, or civil society. And here we'll see a consolidated table of the top level actions on the right side here. And maybe that's what we need to be looking for, is how we do this consolidation piece, because this shows how the actions relate to all of those targets in the GBF. Of course, it needs to be available in different languages, and we are hopefully going to raise funding to do that. Or if there is willing volunteers out there who can help us, that would be marvelous. So we want to translate this into multiple languages, at least the 6 official languages of the United Nations. And language, we know that when we're looking at target audiences, language is absolutely key. We really need to shift from fungi conservation being seen as this niche area and being much more mainstream, while also emphasizing its fungi's essential role in things like ecosystem functioning, food and economic security, and planetary health. We know and we understand that many governments are overwhelmed and progress towards global targets is at best slow. And the alignment with the GBF, however, though, is intended to lessen that burden, but we do need to go a step further, and we need to match our expertise nationally with those governments and national representatives to aid this implementation. Case studies, I've called them gold here because I really feel that they are that valuable. They demonstrate the possible, they are more broadly understood, and they tick the language and accessibility boxes. And implementation has to be grounded in local experience. So essentially, we need a strategy to increase visibility, improve understanding, create a collaborative movement around fungal conservation, equating to scaled up action and a lot more attention for this long overlooked kingdom. So Katia mentioned that the strategy has been aligned with the targets of the GBF. So we now must ensure that we get government uptake and explicit recognition of fungi in CBD implementation. So the upcoming CBD COP in Armenia in October is the best opportunity for us to do this. It's strategically relevant and time sensitive. And our plan there is to promote the strategy and encourage its inclusion in national biodiversity strategy plans and frameworks, position the strategy as a go-to framework that guides actions that are needed and that are effective for fungal conservation, and to show how the Fungi Pledge and the global strategy work in hand. So Katia mentioned what the pledge is doing, but it signals the country's intent, the saying, while the strategy guides that implementation of action they're doing. So fundamentally, by being present at this COP, we are securing the interest and engagement of CBD parties and conference participants, which is essential if we want to translate this strategy into real implementation on the ground. So, a big splash at COP in Armenia. This is the first time we'll ever have a fungi hub, and this is what AI thinks it's going to look like. There. Marvelous. I mean, we have taken over the entire conference center with this huge fungi hub, and well, our dream would look like this. It's a bit more scaled down in a fungi booth, but it will be a dedicated space for representation of the mycological community and the global fungal conservation network to present a really strong collective voice for fungi. And like I said, we haven't had this before, so it's going to be really, really important for us to speak up around the strategy. We will walk delegates through the strategy, discuss those implementation pathways, and make the connections with the experts behind it. We will also discuss how the strategy set of priorities can support the integration of fungi into policy, planning, research, and really importantly as well, investment decisions. Oh, sorry. So, using the momentum at COP, we need to keep pushing for implementation. And of course, this has its challenges. There's a lot of actions, research, and infrastructure needs for fungi, and the reality of getting all of these implemented needs to be set against the challenges that different countries are faced with, such as limited taxonomic capacity, general capacity, baseline data, and sustainable funding support. We suggest that prioritization and phased implementation pathways, so the short, the medium, and the longer term, should be put in place, which complement national circumstances, capacities, and resources. We've suggested that a useful first step where they exist is to prioritize actions to fit with NBSAP's National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plans. These are the blueprints for wider restoration, nature restoration and protection, and they are a really great, readily available framework for integration. And we can use what already exists. What relevant organizational strategies and programs can be used to map where these actions can practically contribute to their overall aims and targets. It's all about the streamlining. Other sources may also include connecting with national CBD focal points, lead institutions, and regional coordination bodies within countries. What we must do, as emphasised by the KNGBF, is to ensure that the execution of the strategy's actions do not exacerbate inequalities or marginalise vulnerable communities in developing countries. So, excitingly, some countries are now developing their own national strategies. And for example, in the UK, a new collaborative network for fungal conservation has recently been created. Their key objectives are to accelerate research, pool data and resources, and be a source of and share knowledge, provide management advice, and advance fungal conservation more generally in the UK. Assisted by Plant Life as their central coordinator, this network is actually undertaking the role of developing a new strategy for fungal conservation in the UK. So a previous strategy did exist, and this is the timeline that it existed in, and it set out 5 objectives and supporting targets. And you can see that many of those would apply today, but there was a general agreement for the need to build on these and make the newer strategy a better fit to the current fungal conservation and policy landscape, and building on that much improved knowledge and information that we now have. It's going to be applied and used across all UK nations, and it's also being developed to align with the global fungal conservation strategy. Plant Life is coordinating and overseeing development of both of these strategies, so that is really assisting with this alignment and connection process. It's hoped that this strategy will be completed by the end of the year. A draft is currently out for consultation within the UK network. And once completed, we really hope this inspires other countries and motivates them to follow suit and develop their own national strategy. So what's next after implementation? Of course, it's the monitoring and the reporting, and we're all going to let out a slow groan because this is not easy. And full disclosure, we really don't have this entirely worked out, but that's not really uncommon either in the conservation sector. But we will be guided by the monitoring framework of the KNGBF, but we have to be mindful that the data limitations do exist with fungi. But that's why in the strategy, we have these really important sections on how to fill those those knowledge gaps and those information gaps. We still have a long way to go to fill those gaps, but positively, we made great strides in red list assessments. This is just the beginning. We will catch up with plants. We absolutely will. The CBD does have a new tool for non-state actors. Non-state actors is just a generic term for all of those actors that sit outside national governments. National governments are the ones that have to formally report. So this is a new mechanism for allowing other people to voluntarily register, plan, and execute their measurable actions that support the goals of the GBF. Again, it's an added commitment. It will need capacity and time to do that. So we will be assessing whether we can do something that feeds into this or simplify it so that it's a better fit for our community of practitioners. And monitoring, it's so important that we monitor and record these actions because it builds up our data and evidence base for fungi, and it adds to that gold stash of case studies, showing by doing. So the key messages we really hope we have shared with you today are that policy is defined by countries, but influenced by science. The strategy will help to influence policy, but it's the policies which are in place which actually drive that implementation. The strategy has been developed to be an implementation tool which enables the incorporation of fungi into broader conservation action and really brings it into the spotlight rather than just being shifted away. And we need to act now. I think Katia really emphasizes that we have to get those actions and implemented in parallel with the research and infrastructure needs, but not not sitting side by side. They've got to be done and implemented together. And we're looking at that really important collaboration piece across the sectors. We cannot expect governments to do everything. We've got to work with this broad society approach, communicate and translate in a way that make the work make sense to them. So to wrap up, we really want you to come in. We warmly invite you for your inputs and suggestions to the strategy. You absolutely do not need to be a mycological expert to do this. We need to know if you will find the strategy accessible, if it would usefully serve the people in the sector or sectors you work with or represent, and how we can elevate this to the rightful place in the global conservation agenda. We would absolutely be delighted if you know of any ways that you can open a door for us into the countries and help us to engage your governments. Please get in touch with us if you're able to do that. And thanks for joining today. Time is precious, but we really appreciate you joining us. And if you scan on these scan codes, they will take you to how you provide that feedback to the strategy, and if you want to join the Global Fungal Conservation Network. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Rachel and Katya. We do have one question already, so I don't know if anyone wants to say anything, or we can move directly into our Q&A and discussion. Great. I do think, Rachel, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just remembered something to say. If people want to give feedback in the strategy but don't want to join the network, that's fine. You don't have to be part of the network to provide feedback. So yeah, I just remembered that. So
wonderful. And I do hope I included those links again in the chat so everyone can see both where to submit your feedback for the strategy, as well as if you're interested in joining, how to join the network. And we will send all the links out again after with the recording as well. Rachel, this first question actually seems like it ties into what you were saying at the end there very well. This question's from Jeff. For national governments or others that want to implement aspects of the strategy after the release, but have additional questions or want support or consultation in their specific context, how do you envision this support is provided? Is it the strategy network? Is it mycologists based in the country? Is there training of existing environmental consultants? What types of support do you all envision?
Yeah, All would be marvelous. We have to get, like anything else with this strategy, we are doing our best to raise funds. And so by raising funds, we can help with the capacity that's needed to support government. So we as a team will definitely be offering that support. But where it's really important is to bring in the national expertise and match that national expertise up with the government levels. We often find that people working on the ground doing great jobs, they're fully immersed, they are usually completely overloaded with their work, but don't have that connecting piece into the government. So we want to help with that. We want to be connecting the two, but also overall supporting those conversations. And I think this is also where the national implementation piece is important in showing what other countries are doing by developing those national strategies, because of course, every country has its different needs and requirements for fungi in different species, but it does show countries that it's doable and practical and can follow the kind of blueprint of what those strategies look like. So training we haven't talked about, and that would be really valuable and great. But I think right now the connection piece is really important, and it would be the global conservation network that's doing that, and our core group here.
Yeah, I would just add to that is cooperating and collaborating with wonderful organizations like Reverse the Red, which is, their remit is to make those connections with national and whatever else. So we're so pleased to be on this call with Reverse the Red and as one of our partners, but others that are on this call are know of other like-minded organizations that we could connect with would be great.
Wonderful. Katya, anything to add?
No, I think Rachel and Greg said it all. Yeah, basically, we need everyone. We want all hands on board.
Wonderful. I'm going to stall and see if there's any more questions for a moment. One question for you all from me. Just if you could talk a little bit more about maybe the process for the feedback for the strategy. People are going to submit their comments for consultation. What happens in between, and what is a little bit more about what the launch maybe at COP looks like.
Yeah, maybe I can go through the feedback process and then Rachel and Greg can talk about the launch. Yeah, so we have a form. We try to think what would be the best way to receive feedback without having to deal with multiple track changes on documents, because hopefully we'll have hundreds of feedback. So yeah, so we found, I know it's not the easiest and the best way, but it's the compromise we found was with Google Form, where people can comment if we're missing an important action or some information, yeah, that we might not have thought about to include on the strategy. When the consultation closes on June 22nd, then we will go through all the comments and suggestions. And as any other consultation process is finding a balance to integrate most of them, right? I don't know if we'll have contradictory comments, but hopefully not, and it will be easy just to incorporate everything. But I'm already apologizing in advance if one of your comments it doesn't end up in the final version. We're trying to balance having as much information as possible without having a super long document, right? So it's that tricky balance. Then we will try to get it online. So once we have the final version, we'll try to work on a website and try to have an online document, a dynamic version that people can click through the different actions, the different resources, the case studies, all of that. And we're likely gonna have a streamlined version, as Rachel mentioned, that will print to launch at COP. And Rachel and Greg can talk about the launch at COP.
Well, I myself
Yeah.
so looking forward to that massive booth that Rachel showed. I'm glad I wasn't on screen because I did laugh a bit when I saw that. Looks great. but we do have a big team, right? We have members from Fungi Foundation, which would be highlighting the pledge. Our group, we have the Armenian Mycological Society there. We have Mycosphere from Canada. We have some other folks that are be there. Our wonderful collaborators from Dubai is going to be in part of the group. So we're going to have a nice team that represents kind of a broad range of geographies and actions that'll be part of the booth. And we're just going to try to. We'll have pins again. If any of you were at the COP16 and like the fungi pins, we'll have pins again. Turn over to Rachel. She knows more what's going on, but I'm just excited about it.
Well, I would be excited if we managed to get a booth that big. Um, I think, yeah. I mean, it's all in the planning stage, and it absolutely relies on CBD process, which we all know is quite difficult because we can't say for sure whether we'll get accepted for a booth or where that's going to be. But we want to have a reception and a side event that invites countries to show them, do exactly what we've done here, show them what the strategy is. But so those events will take place, and it's simultaneously working with the delegates and joining piece again, that connection piece. And that's why this fungi booth is really important, because it is representing the whole group of people, showing how fungi conservation works. So how those conservation actions tick off parts of the strategy, but also, just having chats with countries to say this is not an impractical thing that, overloads you again, and really walking them through those processes.
Wonderful. We have a couple more questions that have come in. So one is wondering about the prioritization and phased implementation pathways. So they're quite country specific there, but wondering if the network or the strategy will offer guidance on how countries can prioritize or phase implementation.
I can jump in. Yeah, we're not planning to have that as part of the strategy at this stage, but our hope is that we will the network will engage with countries to define those priorities. So as you mentioned, Megan, it's very dependent on the country, it's very dependent on the context, what resources they have available and all of that. So we hope that as countries become interested in implementing the strategy, that we can connect them with the experts in country that are hopefully will be part of the global network, but if they are not, we will try to look for them as well. So I think there will be a process of looking who's in country, who can support with each different targets, because you have people working on different areas, right? And making that connection, and then having a conversation to identify which ones are key priorities for that national context.
Great. And a sort of related question. Hannah's wondering if there's national subgroups to connect with other folks within their country. You mentioned the Armenian Mycological Society, so there's certainly some areas out there, but I don't know if there's a way to find everyone in your country, either maybe through the Global Fungi Network or otherwise.
Well, one of our key targets for engagement are going to be mycological societies across the globe. So we're partnering well with the International Mycological Association, which is kind of an umbrella organization, and then with more regional national groups. So that's where we're having it. We have, and then the network hopefully will help make those connections as well. So one of our challenges, and one of the things we hope we'll talk about next week during the session, is really how do we build that. So the plant community has been very successful with their global plant strategy, but that's because they have the Botanic Garden Conservation International. They already have that network of conservation organizations. The mycological community doesn't have that. So we're really looking at, and we're interested in getting ideas on how we're going to reach all of our partners that we need to.
If I may also do a quick Reverse the Red plug, we have a Reverse the Red species pledge. And so we've been categorizing and finding all kinds of conservation action for all species. And so if you're working on assessments, which I know a lot of the fungi are kind of in the assessment stage, if you're working on assessments or conservation plans or any other kind of action, we would love to know about it from Reverse the Red side. I'll put that in the chat. And you can also search for people in your country doing similar work, working on similar species, working on other species. So that's all up to you and somewhere that you can certainly look for and search for connections as well. Another networking question I have here in the chat, just a quick procedural question, wondering about when folks can expect to hear back about their application to join the network.
Good question. So, because we currently have limited resources, we're not going to send an email approving each application. So, if you have not heard from us, consider yourself part of the network. If we do find an application that somehow does not match the terms of reference. So when you sign up, the form will have the terms of reference. You can see exactly what we are expecting from you as a member. So if we find an application that doesn't match those terms of references, then we would reach out to that person, letting them know that we don't think their expertise or they are a good fit for this network, because we don't want to have just numbers. We want to have an engaged network that will support at this stage the development of the strategy, but hopefully later the implementation stage as well. And that doesn't mean you have to implement all the actions, even if it's just communication and sharing ideas and things like that. But so if you haven't heard, you're part of the network. If there's any issue with your application, then we'll reach out to you. At least at this stage, that's how we have to do it, because we have such limited capacity.
And we do plan to send out an email, a kind of a communication piece. We were just trying to get the strategy out and whatever else. And so give us a little bit of time and we will be in contact with all of you and start developing that, because we want the network to be a network. We want it to be communicative. We want it to be interactive. And so it's not just a list of names on a spreadsheet, but it's actually an interactive, collaborating community. So we'll do that. Just there's really right now the three of us that's kind of driving this. And so, that's where we are.
Excellent. I've got one other question so far in the chat here. How are you planning to expand contact and engagement with indigenous and local communities?
I can take that. That's where the network's going to help, right? Because all three of us are in the global north, in fairly developed countries. And so we are going to need, and this is where, you get to be hyper local in some cases. And so that's where this network, that's where communication, that's where bringing this down to NGOs and others that might be working with these communities will be critical. And then I'll turn over to Rachel or Katya that may have a better response than that. But
No, because I think Greg's absolutely right. It's a sensitive area and needs careful planning on how we do that. And we have to use the professionals here, the experts, the people who understand, who know these communities and can talk to them. We will use other organizations that are good at this. Again, we're a small group. We can't expect to have all the expertise here, but the importance of this connection with those local communities and indigenous peoples is really vital. So we have to get it right. There's no doubt about that. And there are people doing it that have got it right. So we need to reach out to those people, learn from them. And COP, I think, there is a presence at COP. It often tends to be dissociated from the government and whatever. But I think we've also got a really, really good opportunity there as well to plug into the right networks.
Yeah. And just say if you are part of an indigenous group
Yeah.
or local community, or if you have those connections, please do share this with them and come back to us with any feedback you might have. We're really relying on word of mouth for a lot of this work because, as we mentioned, we have such limited capacity, and we've been really prioritizing to get the strategy out for people to provide feedback, and then we'll be preparing for COP. So yeah, please do share widely, make those connections if you have them, yeah, and reach out to us. And be critical. That's the other thing. If we miss something in your feedback, don't be afraid to be critical. Again, don't be upset if you don't see your feedback in the final version. We're really going to try to do our best to incorporate most of the comments, if not all of them, being aware that it's a tricky balance in terms of content and length. But yeah, don't be afraid to be critical.
Excellent. I'm going to put the link in the chat one more time for next week's discussion session, and we don't have any more questions right now, so just wondering if anyone wants to say a few words about next week's session and how that'll go, because that'll look a lot more like a discussion and a lot less like a webinar.
Yeah. Before that, I saw that there was another comment here from Hannah about, you know, we're not at, there is no cost to joining the network. Well, the cost is we want your enthusiasm, your engagement, your brain power. That's what we want, right? So that's the cost of membership into the network. But anyway, yeah. Yeah, Katya, do you want to talk about next week or?
Yeah, sure. So we I must confess, we've been going one day at a time and we haven't have a full plan for next week. But our idea was really to open the space because we didn't know how much time we would have in those webinars to have an open discussion. So we're hoping next week um, we can actually see you. I don't know, Megan, we should have mentioned this. I don't, yeah, okay, people, we can see people and we can have more like a brainstorming. Okay, next steps, what should we do differently? How should we prepare for our implementation? What do you think is the best way to engage this network? And things like that. So we're going to think about the structure, but the idea is really we might have just a quick introduction for the people who missed the other two webinars, but it should be very, very quick. And then it will be all about the whole group discussing and sharing ideas. That's the whole point.
And given that we've given a good overview today, people are prepped and ready and very excited to go and read it. So they do their homework ahead of the session next week. That's what we're really hoping for.
Wonderful. And that's it for questions. Oh, do you have a social media presence? Last question coming in.
Just personally, we still don't have a social media presence as a network or as
yeah.
the strategy. Yeah, but we're using Plant Life. So our main source of communication in social media has been Plant Life's channels. So if you're not following Plant Life, please do, and Rachel will tell you which channels you can follow. I'm very limited with social media, so I've mainly been focusing on LinkedIn lately. But yeah, I know Plant Life has other channels as well.
Fantastic. We'll also a note for you, of course, but if you have anything to share, we can share it through the Reverse the Red network as well, which we would be happy to do. Wonderful. Well, that's it for the questions for today. We'll send out the recording, we'll send out all of the links again, and hope to see everyone again next week for the final discussion session. So thanks everyone for joining, and hope you all have a great rest of your morning, evening, wherever you are.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you all.
Bye. Bye.